Good morning, and welcome to the White House Conference on Women's Health Research. President Biden established the first ever Gender Policy Council, which I've had the privilege of leading, with a simple but powerful directive to put women and girls at the heart of everything his administration does. And under his leadership, that is exactly what we've done. From historic reforms to address violence against women and girls, an issue that President Biden has championed since being a U.S. Senator, to fighting for women's economic security, to expanding access to child care for working families, to combating the maternal health crisis, and lowering drug costs for millions of women with Medicare. There's so much more that could be said about the Biden administration's historic achievements, but suffice it to say, there is no greater champion for gender equity and equality than this president. And that brings us to today and the progress we've made already through the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research, which the President and First Lady launched just over a year ago. As those here gathered know all too well, women make up half the population, but for far too long, women's health research has been underfunded and understudied. To close the research gaps and pioneer the next generation of discoveries, the President and the First Lady set out to fundamentally change how we approach and fund women's health research. Since the initiative began, the Biden administration has prioritized women's health research like no prior administration. And I want to take a minute to acknowledge my federal colleagues in this room who made this progress possible across the initiative's 15 constituent agencies, and in particular, Dr. Monica Bertinoli, the director of the National Institutes of Health. Who has been an incredible partner in this work and leader in this work. Over the past year, we've already committed nearly $1 billion for women's health research, which will support groundbreaking and interdisciplinary research on topics like heart health, bone health, menopause, and more. And in his State of the Union address, the President called on Congress to make a bold, transformative investment of $12 billion to support women's health research, including to create a new central fund for women's health research at the National Institutes of Health. The President also issued an executive order to direct federal agencies to make changes that will lead to better research and evidence and, in turn, better care for women. As just one example, agencies have strengthened their research and data standards to ensure that women's health is being considered at every point in the research process, from grant applications to data analysis to reporting. These new requirements will help ensure that federal research dollars work harder for women and advance our knowledge of women's health. In his executive order, the President also encouraged agencies to prioritize research on women's midlife health because he knows we need to do more to address research gaps on diseases and conditions that are more likely to occur after menopause, such as rheumatoid arthritis, heart attack, and osteoporosis. To close these gaps, agencies are developing robust research agendas to improve prevention, diagnosis, and treatment, and strengthening data collection on women's midlife health. We're confident that these new investments and the policies we've put in place across the Biden administration will contribute to future research breakthroughs, new treatment guidelines, and ultimately better healthcare and outcomes for women. I'll close by saying thank you to the Milken Institute for their partnership on this important conference, and thank you to all of you who are gathered here today. As I look around this room, I see so many trailblazers who've been fighting to advance women's health research for generations and for the next generation. It's your commitment and your work that have advanced the field and brought us to this moment of opportunity. Together, we'll continue to improve the health and lives of women everywhere. Thank you.
Please welcome Chair of the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research, Dr. Carolyn Missouri.
Good morning. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. to thank you and all those who have made the work of the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research possible, to celebrate the far-reaching collaborative work of the initiative, and to bring greater clarity to the enduring commitment to carry this work forward and to the opportunities that are before us now. I came to the White House as a clinician, a researcher, and the founder of the Interdisciplinary Women's Health Research Center at the Yale School of Medicine. And I've directed that center for 25 years. Over those years, thanks to the efforts of many, including people in this audience, colleagues across the nation, and those who came before us, women's health is now a recognized field of scientific study. It spans the breadth of health conditions that women experience, and there has been exponential growth in the meaningful research showing how health and disorders can differ for women and men, and the underlying basis for those differences, which can then translate into the development of targeted treatment and prevention strategies. Moreover, research has within its focus the development of data-driven interventions resulting in innovations in care, and importantly, there has been the successful development of new careers in women's health research, which will propel research and empirically based care into the future. And so, based on my experience, the scientific foundation is built. The stage is set for the further discovery and implementation of findings that are needed to improve women's health. And right now, we are at a very special moment. It's a special moment in the history of women's health research in that never before has there been such awareness, enthusiasm, support, and momentum from government, academic research centers, nonprofits, philanthropy, and industry, as well as from advocacy organizations and long-term devoted leaders for women such as Maria Shriver, who all want to remedy the gap in knowledge on the health conditions that affect women uniquely, differently, and/or disproportionately than they do men. We are at this special point in time because Dr. Biden and this administration have raised the national consciousness on the importance of women's health research and the value of investing in women's health. From listening sessions to lab tours at research institutions across the nation to speaking directly with women and innovators, Dr. Biden has heard firsthand about the health concerns women face and the research that can address these concerns when we invest in women's health. Since the President launched the initiative, the First Lady has led the way. The result has been a comprehensive federal effort to spur innovation in women's health, to ensure that federally funded health research works harder for women, and to encourage mission-driven partnerships across sectors to close research gaps in women's health. And now, we have the opportunity to build on the initiative's momentum and invest in ambitious new research, generate clinically relevant data, and develop and implement the needed groundbreaking treatments for women. If we grow the scope and depth of women's health research, women's lives will improve, families will benefit, and the nation will thrive. In closing, I thank all of you for the work that you do and for caring about the health and lives of women. Thank you.
Please welcome founder of the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, Maria Shriver.
How beautiful does this room look, and how beautiful does everybody who's in this room look on this day. Good morning to all of you who are doctors, advocates, activists, researchers, and all-around badasses. That is you that I am talking to. Give yourself a round of applause. This morning, may we all take a moment to celebrate the extraordinary accomplishments of the groundbreaking White House initiative on women's health research that was launched just 1 year ago. In 1 year, everybody in this room kicked butt. This is indeed a moment to celebrate, to give thanks, to acknowledge all that got accomplished, because everyone had a vision. They had a vision and a purpose that was larger than any one person. And what got done because everybody was brave, everybody was relentless, and everybody reached high. What got accomplished was and is historic, starting with the fact that not, as you heard earlier, not until this president and this first lady did we ever have a White House mandate regarding women's health research. Not until the Bidens did anyone ever think to make women's health and research a priority for the federal government. Let that sink in. So thank you, Mr. President, and I know he'll be joining us in just a bit, and thank you, Dr. Biden, for recognizing this issue is one of health equity and justice for American women. Thank you to Jennifer Klein, Dr. Mazzuri, Secretary Becerra, and everybody who worked to prioritize women's health research and pulled off everything that you just heard about this morning. There are 167.5 million American women in this country, women of every age, ethnicity, race, religion, and a political affiliation whose lives will be forever changed by the work that got accomplished this past year and the work that is yet to come. Let us remember that the commitment to change the future for women's health started here, inside this House, that has the promise and the potential to impact the world. You know, every time I walk into this house, I think of my mother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, and she loved this place for a whole host of reasons, but she understood the power and the possibility that it holds. She knew better than most that those who live here matter. What they're interested in changes our nation. It changes the conversation that our nation has, and most importantly, it changes lives. She always told me, Maria, do not be afraid to go to whoever holds the power if you really want to get something big done. And that's why I went to Joe Biden. On a Saturday morning, I spoke to her about the lack of funding, the lack of research in women's health, and the opportunity for her and this administration to do something historic, something transformative, even life-changing, which was to level the playing field for women when it comes to health research. And she took it from there, and in record time, coordinated the biggest revolution in how women and girls in this country will have their future physical and mental health needs met. I've been around a long time, as many in this audience have also been, and I have never seen government work this quickly. You in this room are part of this historic undertaking, this seismic transformation in women's health. And every single person in this room knows what is at stake moving forward. Without our health, we cannot work, we cannot parent, we cannot be caregivers. And we also recognize that everybody in this room is one diagnosis away from a life-changing moment that could jeopardize the very communities and the families who depend on each and every one of us. I really hope that this effort to prioritize women's health expands way beyond our government. I hope that every tech founder, philanthropist, innovator, scientist, researcher, every elected official in this room and beyond joins in this clarion call for justice and equity. As you heard this year, the President also called on Congress to pledge $12 billion towards the future of women's health research. That's what it will take, he said, to bring us to parity, to get the women in this country the answers that they and we need in order to make sound, informed healthcare decisions that will save lives. What else will it take? It will take all of us working together to build something new. Women all across this nation of all faiths, races, and political persuasions will need to tell our stories, and we will need to demand justice and fairness for women and girls. You know, when I was First Lady of California, I often invoked the Roman goddess Minerva, not just because she was on the California state seal, but because she was a goddess of wisdom and she was a warrior. Minerva knew when to put on her helmet and fight, and she knew when to take it off and talk about compassion and justice and wisdom. I believe every single woman in this country is a Minerva who can and will fight for something way larger than herself. Minerva vanquished everything she set her brilliant mind to. And I believe moving forward, this effort will take all of our brilliant minds and our open hearts as well. It will be hard, no doubt about that, but it will galvanize the best among us. It will spur us into action and prove yet again that reaching for the stars is within our grasp. There is no doubt in my mind that we will make good on this pledge to continue to transform women's health. No doubt in my mind that we will be able to show women across this nation that they are valued, that they are worthy, that their lives matter, and that their stories are real. We women do brave, hard things because we recognize that brave, hard things are what create a more just, a more tender, and more loving world. Emerson once wrote that what lies behind us and what lies in front of us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. So today, I hope we can all tap into what lies within us and light it on fire. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Biden.
Please welcome Executive Vice President of Milken Institute Health, Esther Krofa.
Welcome to the first ever White House Conference on Women's Health Research. This conference was organized in collaboration with the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research and the Milken Institute to advance health research and discuss how to continue making progress on improving women's health. I would like to begin by recognizing and thanking leaders, so many of you who are in this room, and many who are in labs and clinics and communities who have worked tirelessly for decades with passion and creativity to move the needle on women's health. Because of the seeds sown by these champions, we are here today. The accomplishments of the White House Initiative in this past year alone has been extraordinary. Not only do we have energy and momentum on our side, but we are seeing results across research, industry, and advocacy. We have seen increased collaborations in elevation of women's health as a priority because of the leadership of the White House. More investment of funds are going into capital for women's health innovation. More teams are being built to scale innovations on everything from autoimmune disease to menopause to digital health solutions. Over the next hour and a half, you will hear from leaders at the cutting edge of research and innovation working to move us forward. We will start with 3 dynamic presentations from researchers at the front lines and 2 panels of leaders addressing the business case for investing in women's health and leaders using their voice to move women's health forward for the many, many years to come. Today is all about hope and excitement, and I hope that all of you can feel that today. Advances have been made to improve women's health, but there are many more areas to tackle. Data show that we face persistent underinvestment in research on women's health across many different disease conditions. Although 31 years ago, Congress passed the NIH Revitalization Act, requiring women and people of color to be included in NIH-funded clinical trials, underrepresentation of women in clinical trials, particularly in early stage, persists. In the US, only 4% of healthcare-related research and development efforts are targeted specifically at women's health issues. Addressing these gaps could lead to improvements in women's health outcomes, increased years spent in good health, reduced years of disease, and reductions in disruptions to work productivity. We have, as women, significant market potential. Investments addressing the women's health gap could potentially boost the global economy by $1 trillion annually by 2040 and add more women who stay longer in the workforce. We must change how we approach and fund research on women's health. At the Milken Institute, we've been working with many of the people in this room to design funding and partnership solutions to bridge gaps and spur innovation. We hope to engage many more of you as we put together a coalition of the willing, a network that can provide resources for improved research, allow for better data sharing, scale up investments in women's health. We are just at the beginning of the sea change. Progress is possible and can be achieved through partnership. Let's move with haste to create and solidify collaborations to improve women's health. And now, please join me in welcoming our first speakers to the stage, discussing the next wave of scientific innovation in women's health. I'd like to introduce Dr. Marlena Fazo of the University of Southern California. Please join me. Dr. Martha Galati of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Smith Heart Institute. Join me. And Dr. Lisa Mosconi of Weill Cornell Medicine to join me, please.
We have been able to walk on the moon for decades, yet women are still dying from nausea and vomiting of pregnancy. Nausea and vomiting affects approximately 70% of all pregnancies and leads to 23 days of missed work. It costs $2.2 billion a year in the United States. Hyperemesis gravidarum is the severe end of the clinical spectrum and leads to 60 missed days of work. We now know that it is also associated with adverse outcomes, including preterm birth, increased risk for preeclampsia, postpartum depression, PTSD, and with children, it leads to increased risk for neurodevelopmental delay and autism spectrum disorder, and even smaller brains at age 10. It's not surprising because of the severe nutritional deficiencies these women face during pregnancy. In 1999, I suffered nausea and vomiting so severe I could not eat, drink, or move without violently vomiting. I'd lay completely still on my back. I couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom. It was torture. My doctor put me on 7 different medications at once, but nothing helped. I was given IV fluids and eventually a feeding tube, but it was too late, and I miscarried at 15 weeks gestation. During that time, my doctor told me that I was exaggerating my symptoms for attention. So after I recovered, I decided to devote my life to finding the cause of hyperemesis gravidarum. So I have a PhD from Harvard in women's health, where I found the first genes for uterine fibroid tumors. So I decided to take a genetics approach to find the cause. I couldn't get support for my work, so I had to work on weekends and nights and Fridays, recruiting over 1,000 patients to study. During the day, I worked on ovarian cancer for 20 years. I'm delighted to say that I have now found the cause of nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. It is... Thank you. It's caused by a hormone called GDF15, and we now have potential ways to both treat and prevent it. So now it is all hands on deck. I'm working to open women's healthcare treatment centers, first focused on hyperemesis gravidarum, so that women can get compassionate care rather than what is currently happening, which is that they go to emergency rooms, waiting on the floor, nauseous for hours, to get treated with IV fluids, sent home, only to have to return again. I'm also working with pharma to develop a drug for hyperemesis and working to test a strategy to prevent hyperemesis gravidarum. I'm eternally grateful to Dr. Biden for shining a much-needed light on women's health, and I know it will improve the health of people for generations to come. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd first like to thank the First Lady and the President for inviting us all here today. I am Dr. Martha Galati, and I'm a cardiologist and the Associate Director of the Barbara Streisand Women's Heart Center at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, California. We had the honor of having the First Lady with us about a year ago, talking about heart disease and the research that needed to be done in order to save more women's hearts, given that heart disease is the leading killer of women in the United States. I'm here today to tell you about the progress that has been made in just a short 1 year's time, and of course, the work that we need to do. So we have led a study called the Warrior Study, which has just been completed. I don't get to share the results with you because we don't even know the results. But the Warrior Study was examining women with ischemic heart disease who have small vessel disease. When ischemic heart disease, just to be aware of what that is, that's when people experience chest pain or equivalent symptoms due to reduced blood flow to the heart. For men, often it is due to an obstruction in a big vessel in the coronary artery, but for women, it's often the microvasculature. And we don't have any guidelines telling us how to treat that small vessel disease, despite it being such a common problem, partially because we've excluded women from so many of our cardiovascular trials. So this study that we did a randomized trial to determine what is the optimal medical therapy for women with small vessel disease who are experiencing such severe symptoms. And in a short few months, we will have the Warrior results available to you all. There's also been other progress. We published recently, in this last year, a paper examining the effect of physical activity on death and death from cardiac causes. We were able to study the National Health Interview Survey, which is from the CDC. And we examined over 400,000 women and men in the United States, and our findings demonstrated that for every minute of exercise, actually women benefited more than men. So for once, we have good news in the cardiology world that women did do better, And maybe one day the guidelines will actually represent different amounts of exercise that we're being told to do. We don't always have to be like little men. So that's some of the work. There's been some exciting developments related to preeclampsia or hypertension during pregnancy and identifying how it affects future risk for cardiovascular disease. Additionally, colleagues of mine at Cedars-Sinai have developed biomarkers to better predict who is going to develop preeclampsia, and that way we might be able to treat people earlier and prevent the consequences of preeclampsia, but also in the future potentially protect them from the future cardiovascular risk. There's also been developments in a disease state in cardiology called heart failure. Heart failure is when the heart doesn't pump effectively. And we know that uniquely for women who undergo breast cancer therapy, they are more likely to develop heart failure as a result of the excellent chemotherapy, yet it does damage to the heart. So we haven't really had any treatment for that, but a recent study called the SARA study was just done in this last year, and it demonstrated that using a medication called an ARNI, or an angiotensin receptor neprilysin inhibitor, if we give that medication, we are more likely to reduce further damage to heart muscle for people who have cancer. And what was also remarkable about this study was not just the amazing results that they demonstrated, but this was a study that enrolled 90% women. When do we hear about that in our cardiology world especially? So these are excellent things for us to celebrate, but the work is obviously not done. Cardiology, cardiovascular research has predominantly been focused on men, and basic research, animal research, and human clinical trials have often left women out of those studies. So we still have to do further work. When we think about women's health, we need to think beyond the reproductive organs and think about the entirety of the woman and how we want to keep them safe. The initiative by the First Lady not only is going to save hearts, but it's going to save women's lives. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It is a real pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm Dr. Lisa Mosconi. I am director of the Alzheimer's Prevention Program in the Women's Brain Initiative at Weill Cornell Medicine, New York Presbyterian. I currently serve as a program director at Wellcome Leap, a global organization dedicated to advancing research in human health, led by the former director of DARPA, Dr. Regina Dugan. I am a neuroscientist specializing in the early detection and prevention of Alzheimer's disease, with a strong focus on women's brain health. Why women? We have known since the 1990s that after aging itself, simply being a woman is the strongest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, to the point that today, nearly 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, namely postmenopausal women. I've been studying this connection for almost 20 years, in part because Alzheimer's affects the women in my family. And we've made progress for sure, but there's still much that we do not know. What we have learned is that women's brains age differently from men's brains, and menopause plays a role here. As a society, we associate menopause with the function of the ovaries and the end of fertility, but in reality, menopause impacts the brain just as much as it does the ovaries. Hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, depression, anxiety, brain fog, memory lapses. Those are all neurological symptoms that come from the ways that menopause changes the brain. We have also learned that so-called sex hormones are brain hormones too. And estrogen in particular is a neuroprotective hormone that literally shields the brain from aging and from disease. So when estrogen declines, the brain enters a window of vulnerability during which the risk for Alzheimer's can increase. Now, to be clear, all women go through menopause, but not all women develop Alzheimer's or dementia. So the real question is, what keeps us healthy and what makes some women vulnerable instead? So what we have learned is that the longer reproductive span and the longer exposure to estrogen throughout life may protect against dementia, whereas estrogen deprivation, especially following early or induced menopause, has been linked with an increased risk. We have also learned that there is a connection between Alzheimer's and menopause hormone therapy, which we need more research to fully clarify. But I will say this, about 130 million American women use some form of hormone therapy, whether birth control, menopause hormone therapy, endocrine therapies for reproductive cancers, and yet we have never been able to directly measure the effects of these therapies in the brain. Never. This needs to change. We and others have done several studies mapping the impact of menopause and hormone therapy on the brain. My team and I, in collaboration with Dr. Roberta Diaz-Brinton, who is here today, have been looking at alterations in brain structure, function, energy metabolism, which you can see there in the slide, brain connectivity, and overall biochemistry. And we are indebted to the NIH, NIA, to Maria Shriver, to the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, and everyone who supported our work. But these are only the first steps. Today, menopause remains one of the most under-researched, under-diagnosed, under-treated, and underfunded fields of medicine, and so is the care of women's brain health overall. It is my hope that with more research, being a woman will no longer be a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, and that my daughter and the next generations will have answers and effective solutions. And so I will close by noting that we owe women centuries of research. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to these leaders for sharing their insights and experiences about the next wave of scientific innovation for women's health. We will now take a brief moment to set up the stage for our panel discussion on the business case for women's health. Thank you very much.
Trish Stroman of Boston Consulting Group, Dr. Jyoti Gupta of GE Healthcare, Jess Lee of Sequoia Capital, Stephanie Sassman of Genentech, and Dr. Johanna Grossman of the New York Stock Exchange.
Hello, and welcome to our panel to discuss the business case for investing in women's health. I'm really excited to turn the corner from all this research and innovation that's so important to talk about how we bring products to women and providers. I'm Trish Stroman. I'm a senior partner with BCG, where I've spent nearly 20 years working across sectors to support clients in the healthcare industry. At BCG, we've mobilized a team to explore the investment case for women's health. We believe there is incredible unmet need, which we've all heard about this morning, but also a data-backed reason for companies to invest in this space. We're excited about the opportunities we can now shine a spotlight on for stakeholders across the ecosystem. Our analysis shows that just in the US, we are collectively leaving tens of billions of dollars on the table by not giving women the treatment that they need. I'll give you 3 examples, all conditions we've heard about today. First, in osteoporosis, we estimate a total addressable market of over $20 billion by 2030. That's nearly 4 times the market today if women with osteoporosis were diagnosed and treated appropriately. In Alzheimer's, which we just heard about, the total addressable market could be 10x by 2030 if women who are often misdiagnosed or diagnosed too late receive the diagnosis and treatment that they needed. And in menopause, where there's incredible unmet need, we estimate a market of up to $35 billion if women with moderate and severe symptoms were able to seek the treatment they needed. all of that doesn't even fully account for all of the innovation that we heard about this morning. So, with those numbers as food for thought, I'm really excited to hear from our panelists to tell us more about where they see the opportunities. So first, let me introduce everyone. Dr. Jyoti Gupta is President and CEO of Women's Health and X-Ray at GE Healthcare. She's a driving force behind transformative innovations in medical technology, including innovations for women's health, like mammography and bone density testing. Next, we have Jess Lee, who is a trailblazer in gender diversity in the tech and investment worlds. She's a partner and chief product officer at Sequoia Capital, a venture firm based in Silicon Valley. Her portfolio includes Maven Clinic. She's also co-founder of All Raise, a nonprofit dedicated to creating parity for women in the tech ecosystem. Next, we have Stephanie Sassman. She's a portfolio leader in women's health at Genentech, which is part of the Roche Group, where she develops comprehensive solutions for women's health conditions. She's also works to address sex and gender disparities through positions in women's health focus groups at both WEF and the Gates Foundation. And finally, we have Dr. Johanna Grossman, who's the head of healthcare and life sciences capital markets at the New York Stock Exchange. As a champion for innovation in women's health, she leverages her expertise with life science to connect healthcare companies with vital investment opportunities. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Jess, if I can start with you. You're an investor across lots of categories at Sequoia. How does women's health market compare to other markets that you're watching? And maybe how does it compare with other industries that have gone through this kind of acceleration that we're experiencing in women's health just now?
So what's fascinating about women's health is how underhyped of a category it is compared to its massive market potential. I mean, we're talking about a market that affects half of humanity, yet the sector has remained pretty underfunded and underinvested in. You know, at Sequoia, we've had the privilege of partnering over the last 50 years with companies like Apple, NVIDIA, Google, DoorDash, Airbnb, and in the women's health space, Maven Clinic. Kate Ryder is over there. She's a total force of nature. It's the largest telemedicine network in women's and family health. Also Natera, which does prenatal testing and cancer screening and breast cancer screening. But what we found is sometimes the most underhyped sectors are the best places to build very large businesses. That said, it does require pioneers, trailblazers. I'm so grateful for all the people in this room who are those early believers coming together to have this conversation. I also think some of the most obvious markets are sometimes hiding in plain sight. And the reason they're hiding in plain sight is actually tied to the demographics of the people in power. And so venture is an industry that is, when I started 8 years ago and when Kate started the company 10 years ago, I think venture was 7% women. Today it is, I think, 17% women. And so the conversations have started to change. And when Kate was first pitching rooms full of men, I think they just didn't quite relate, didn't quite see what we here, I think, all see as an obviously large market. And so she grinded her way towards building what is now a $1.7 billion company that covers fertility, maternity, postpartum, pediatrics, parenting, and now menopause as well. And that's been such a journey. I think another example of because you asked for an analogy of a market that's been hiding in plain sight, circa 2004 to 2008, if you looked at social networking, a lot of older VCs didn't understand the power of connecting with college kids, didn't get this thing that was happening with the kids, didn't realize that that could turn into what is today a $1.5 trillion company. Meta, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook all came together to form Meta. We're grateful to have been investors in two of them. And it's just very obvious now that venture capital firms should hire young people to stay on top of the Gen Z trends and what's happening in order to make sure they catch these investments. And similarly, I think venture firms are realizing they have to hire women who will see these opportunities, but it does require pioneers like Kate and many of the people in this room to be funded, all your scientific research, we should talk after this. It requires those big businesses to be built for, I think, the capital to move, for the power to move, and for it to be culturally known that, hey, women is big business.
Awesome, thank you. We have the venture perspective. I would love, actually, Stephanie, to come to you a bit for the industry perspective. Our analysis showed that a lot of that untapped market is actually sitting in the biopharma sector. I would love to hear from you about how Roche thinks about this. What are the biggest opportunities that you're seeing, and what will it take to realize them?
Thanks, Trish. It's great to be here, and thank you so much to everybody for all your work on this. When we think about women's health, we truly start with keeping women well. We have diagnostics as well as medicines, and so supporting them if they do get sick. And really thinking about women's health for conditions that uniquely, differently, and predominantly impact women. And so from that perspective, if we think about the business opportunity, I think there's sort of two camps, right? And we've heard about both of them this morning. There's these conditions that uniquely impact women, the so-called bikini medicine, that have been completely under-researched. And I think we heard this morning about research for hyperemesis that was having to be done on people's spare time, right? That should not be the case. But if we think about a condition like endometriosis, it impacts 1 in 10 women for decades of their life, right? It's one of the leading causes of infertility, not to mention school days missed, work days missed, pain that women experience. And if you look at the market for that presently, it's around $1 billion. That's the total market. That's very small. If you think about the size of the women that are impacted by that, 1 in 10. If you also look at the pipeline, it's also quite small. But it is an area that as we have more scientific understanding of the disease, as we have this research come out, we are able to bring forward new innovations that are truly disease modifying in conditions like this. And there are very few disease areas that impact so many patients that don't have any disease-modifying therapies. And so they make them very attractive as you can bring in those disease-modifying therapies and early diagnosis to really make a huge value contribution to the healthcare system and to women, and obviously it's a triple bottom line. The second camp, I would say, and we heard about it also this morning, is these conditions that impact women differently. If we think about cardiology, right, the cardiovascular diseases, the neurological conditions, these are conditions that impact huge amounts of patients. But if we look at women, some of them impact women predominantly, like if we think about Alzheimer's disease or MS, or impact women differently when we think about cardiology. And as we understand the science to that, that also opens up opportunity, right? For women to be diagnosed earlier and for women to be treated earlier. And so there's enormous opportunity. If we look at, what are the biggest investment areas that companies are making? They're in oncology, they're in cardiometabolic diseases, they're in neurological conditions. And right now, obviously, we heard that there's imbalances in really understanding sex and gender. But when you can understand sex and gender, you can bring forward differentiated products. And those differentiated products will create an enormous value. And the value will be for patients, but it will also be for our economy. And that will be a value for the system. And so there's tremendous opportunity in those two camps. And I would say that the research and the things that we're investing in are really what helps to unlock that.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. I love making that connection from the research to the opportunities for companies. It's so important. Jody, if I can come back to you, misdiagnosis or just lack of diagnosis is at the heart of a lot of the challenges we've talked about, both for women, but also to unlock these markets. I would love to hear from you where you see opportunities in the diagnostic space and what will it take to realize them? What are some of the challenges?
In the diagnosis space, lots and lots of different areas of opportunity. I'd say one sort of on the digital AI side, the second would be in precision medicine, and then the third in early screening and detection. And so maybe I'll give a few examples. On the digital side, there is so much data generated by our healthcare systems in the US and globally. 97% of the data that's generated is unstructured and goes unused. Right? But there is so much rich information in that data. And so really leveraging generative AI, large language models, and looking at multimodal data, so imaging, lab results, pathology results, genomics, right, and connecting the dots across that, I think has a lot of opportunity. As some examples, women go get mammograms. Mammograms are traditionally used for breast cancer detection. But you can actually also see now, research has shown, breast arterial calcifications, which are a sign of cardiovascular disease. disproportionately affects more women. I used to be in ophthalmology before. Retinal imaging can potentially provide you early indicators for Alzheimer's disease. Again, disproportionately affects more women, right? A lot of women don't go and get their DEXA scans for bone density, but you may go get an X-ray if you broke your leg, or you may go get a CT scan for something. There is data that shows a CT scan or an X-ray can provide bone density information, right? So opportunistically. And these are just a few examples. But if you think of all the data that exists out there, and to your point, things hiding, in this case, perhaps not in plain sight, but there is so much information hiding in the data that is already existing. And so leveraging new tools like Gen AI to unlock, I think can have a rapid impact. On the early detection and screening side, I think endometriosis has been, and just pelvic health in general, has been very, very underserved. Again, hiding in plain sight. MRI is used traditionally, it's been around for decades. It is a great tool to be used for detecting endometriosis. There is no real great non-invasive solution out there today. Usually you have to do surgery. Same goes for ovarian cancer, uterine cancer. There aren't many tools. MRI exists in plain sight. It just hasn't been adopted. And so we at GE Healthcare have done a partnership now, a research partnership with UCSD, where we're creating protocols and basically an atlas and a database to say, how can we use advanced imaging techniques and bring them to the masses to detect endometriosis and other pelvic health diseases. And then precision medicine, I think, is one, to your point, what's innovative and exciting. I think extremely exciting. Radiopharmaceuticals, which are very, very targeted and can help you detect and show up on an image exactly what's happening. I think that is sort of the heart of precision medicine, getting the right diagnosis and the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. And really, radiopharmaceuticals, I think, is a new area that's rapidly growing. We're seeing it for Alzheimer's. You can detect beta amyloid plaque in brain. We're seeing it for coronary artery disease. We're seeing it for estrogen receptor breast cancer. So that is one area that I personally and us at GE Healthcare are very excited about. And I think the new CMS rule allowing for now separate payments for nuclear imaging agents, I think, just unlocks a lot of potential. And as a result of that, we're seeing a lot more investment in that space. And then lastly, care delivery, right? How we deliver care. In breast cancer, when a woman goes for her screening exam, if she has to be called back, it can sometimes be weeks before she gets her next appointment to go for the next imaging and then to go for the biopsy and then potentially get a result. We've seen data show it can be as high as 30 days, in some countries even longer. And so this concept of how do you do sort of a same-day diagnosis or one-stop clinic where you can get your screening and your diagnosis and your biopsy all in one day to reduce the time from a month to just a couple of days. It's sort of another way to sort of get to the early diagnosis. What it would take to recognize this, I think one is people, right? People who are really, really passionate and care about problems. I think at the end of the day, investors and companies invest in people. So I think that's one. If you have that, though, then it really comes down to are you solving the right problems? Are there right clinical outcomes? And is there a return on investment? Right? At the end of the day, we are running a business. We do need to generate a positive return of investment, but that allows us then to reinvest in the next technology, allows us to create jobs, allows us to take these technologies in underserved areas as well as outside the US. And so, making sure the business case makes sense, making sure there's a regulatory pathway, a reimbursement pathway, ensuring you're not adding unnecessary administrative burden to the healthcare system. If you talk to most hospital CEOs today, they will tell you how they are just short on staff. And so, fitting in sort of the practicality and the realities of how care is delivered.
I love that you brought in all the parts of the ecosystem that have to work together to make this all happen. Thank you. Johanna, if I can come to you and maybe go back to the investment side for a bit. You have a very cross-cutting view across the health industry. I would love to get your thoughts of where is private capital flowing in women's health right now, and maybe where is it not flowing as much as we hope it would?
Sure, Trish, thank you. And you've heard a little bit about some of the challenges, which I think I'm going to start with the challenges. So for the average investor, for the average person not in this room, women's health is a new sector. It's a new space. right? And what that means is that there are no real established benchmarks for investors to grab onto to understand, yes, if I invest now, I'm going to get this return of investment in 5 or 10 years from now. So that's one specific challenge. The second challenge is that we were coming out of a difficult funding environment, particularly in life sciences and healthcare, and women's health was not immune to that. Now, having said that, we're all here in this room talking about all the great advancements, and I think over the past, I would say year to year and a half, we're really starting to hear about women's health. And that is bringing the attention of other general investors into this space, which is exciting, specifically in, for example, biopharma. So if you look at historically where women's health investments were made, it was typically more on the health tech side. But actually, over the course of the last year and a half, based off of the amazing data that is being discovered, we've heard about some of them today, that's bringing in money, private capital, into those spaces. The addition of government funding, right, from the White House, from the NIH, also into the space is also attracting private capital because in some ways that helps to subsidize some of the research that's desperately needed, right? So looking at this year in particular, I'm super excited at the fact that, there's about a dozen biopharmas in women's health areas or developing a women's health product that received over 50 million in venture funding this year alone. And I think as we continue to come out of this tough, difficult funding environment into 2025, and as we get more data, that those are some of those spotlight opportunities that perhaps will help women's health and the women's health sector break into the mainstream.
Thanks, Johanna. Maybe if I can stay with you for one follow-up. We have folks in this room from across the healthcare space. So we have researchers and innovators. We also have policymakers and CEOs. I would love to hear what specifically can this group do to continue to accelerate women's health investment in particular?
I think we need to continue to build this community. At the New York Stock Exchange, we have the distinct privilege of sitting in between investors and companies and the entire capital markets ecosystem, and we're using our platform to shine a light on the importance of women's health. 2 years ago, my co-organizer, Jessica Federer, and I came up with the idea of let's bring investors together to talk about women's health. This year, we hosted our second year. Dr. Biden, thank you so much for being our keynote at that event. But this year, we brought in over $1 trillion in AUM, or investors representing over $1 trillion in AUM together to talk about what's new in the space. Let's share ideas. Let's share our thesis. But more importantly, get to know each other, get to know the ecosystem, build those connections, because that's how we're going to drive this forward. So I would encourage and tell everybody here, let's continue to build this community and the connectivity amongst us.
Awesome. It's a great call to action for all of us. We are running short on time, so I'm going to do one rapid fire question straight across the panel. End of year, end of a really incredible year for women's health is a great time for some reflection. So I'd love to hear from all of you, 1 minute or less. One thing to celebrate in 2024, and then what are you most excited about, or what's your kind of thing to watch in women's health for 2025? And we can go straight down the row.
So I think for 2024, lot to celebrate, but I think the biggest one for me really is this, right? We started over, a year ago, last year this time, there was no women's health initiative from the White House. And so this, to me, I think the progress and the momentum and the energy that has been generated has just been phenomenal. When we met with some of the staff here in January this year, we talked about the White House should really do something big and something bold. Little did we know, a couple weeks later, there's ARPA-H, and then there's the DoD funding, and then there's NIH. And so I think the White House really showed us what is possible. It started conversations in our organizations. I think we felt empowered. I certainly felt empowered to use all the data and all the momentum to talk within my organization and also reach outside. I was here at an event, in the spring. I knew one person maybe in the room. Now I've come back and I know so many of you. And so I think it's really just this work has brought the community, as you mentioned, together. And I'm just so grateful and so thankful. And it's the message I'd sent to John around Thanksgiving. I think for 2025, it's really around how do we build on this momentum? The foundation has been laid, so how do we continue? I'm really excited to see what we continue to do together. I'm really excited. You've started a great initiative. I am going to watch closely and see what you do next as well. And so, yeah, that's my 2025 what to watch.
I think I'm excited for the same thing in 2024 and 2025, and that is menopause, which is millennials are starting to enter menopause and are starting to tell the stories, to talk about it. Millennials created wellness culture, destigmatized mental health, and I think just sharing the stories of menopause, which has been sort of not talked about, not discussed, and therefore not funded, both on the research side and on the business side. Just telling the story, I think, creates a catalyst for change and people to know about the problem in the first place. And so I'm just very excited for that.
Yeah, the highlight for 2024 has just been really the amp up of the discussion about women's health. Starting at JP Morgan with the first official women's health event, going to Davos, with the report released about the $1 trillion economic opportunity that we have in the world, to the ARPA-H sprint. It feels like there's been so many highlights of really changing the conversation and bringing in different stakeholders, which has to start obviously with patients and with women. When I look forward to 2025, I think that there's a lot of momentum and partnership to continue. One of the bright spots that I also see is what we can do as employers and forward-thinking employers. And so we have launched Maven and the menopause benefit at our company. It launched more than a year ago in Women's Day 2023. And it's been transformational, but also just looking at our women's health benefits across the line. We recently, as part of our Moonshot commitment, did one-stop shop screening for women where they could get cervical cancer, HPV DNA screening, breast cancer screening, and other screening. And so I think there's a lot of bright spots with regard to employers because it's, again, the triple bottom line. It's going to make a difference to employers' bottom lines, but also, of course, to the women that they serve.
All right, to add on to everything here, I have to come up with something new, but something that I'm actually very excited about is the collaborative that WHAM has created of multi-billion-dollar funds to help drive investments in women's health. So that's definitely one. And then for next year, selfishly, I'm very excited to host our third annual Women's Health Investor Summit at the New York Stock Exchange. And I hope to see many of you there.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. It is so great to have you and to really continue this conversation around investment. I think I am most heartened to see just such alignment between meeting the needs of women and also real market opportunity, which means we can make this happen. And we've coined a new term. I wasn't expecting that out of this panel, so I'm taking menopause with me today. So that's it for us. Thank you, everybody.
Please welcome Liz Plosser of Women's Health, Nancy Brown of the American Heart Association, Robin Arzone of Peloton, Linda Goler-Blount of Black Women's Health Imperative, Dr. Elizabeth Komen of NYU Langone, and Joanna Strober of MIDI Health.
Thank you. I am Liz Plosser. I'm the editor-in-chief of Women's Health. I've been at the brand for 7 years, and I oversee every platform from print to digital, social, video, live events, where we had the great pleasure of having Dr. Biden speak at our recent first ever health summit. So it is a total honor and pleasure to be here today, leading this panel of esteemed women in health. We have with us nonprofit leaders and advocates, philanthropy and business leaders, communicators, and I am so excited to unpack with each of you the roles that you play and the path forward for women's health. I know each of you personally, or I know of you, and now we know each other personally today as well. And I've had the privilege of being able to share your perspective and your expertise across our channels at Women's Health. Thank you for sharing your stories and all of your knowledge. I want to begin by asking each of you to share with us your why. Why are you here today? Why is women's health so important to you personally? And we'll begin with you, Joanna.
Yeah, so, everyone is starting with their personal stories, and I think that's what's so actually amazing about this group is that people here are truly trying to solve problems that impact them, impact their mothers, their daughters, their friends. For me, it was very personal. I was around 47 and at the top of my career, and I stopped sleeping. And we all have that experience, or many of us, actually everyone probably will, where you go and it's amazing how everyone goes through menopause. So what happens, you stop sleeping. You wake up in the middle of the night and actually your bed might be soaking wet. You kick your partner out because you need their side of the bed. And then you go to work the next day and you're tired. And then you start experiencing brain fog and you start forgetting client names and it starts being very stressful. For me, it was also, I lost my car in the parking lot a few times and I couldn't remember where I parked. And I found it so anxiety provoking, and that was impacting me at home. It was impacting me with my family. It was impacting me at work. I started thinking, wow, can I continue? I have this great career. Can I continue doing this if my body is giving out on me? I also had seen 2 grandparents go through Alzheimer's, so I was scared of that and very concerned that that would happen to me. So I started trying to get care, and honestly, it was impossible. I live in Palo Alto. I couldn't get a doctor's visit. 9 months to get into Stanford in order for someone to see me. I could not find the right person. I went to a primary care doctor. They told me sleeping pills, but said I could only take them once in a while because they're addictive. I went to a sleep specialist. I did not have sleep apnea. All this is what we're all talking about. It's just perimenopause. But honestly, perimenopause is insidious because you don't know you have it. And so it's something that derails us before we even know it's happening. So I ended up quitting my job. I started this company, MIDI Health, and now I think we're the biggest menopause clinic in the world, actually. We're treating hundreds of thousands of women. And there are a lot of them in perimenopause. They're all coming and going, just what we're talking about. What's happening with my body? Can you please help me? So it's incredibly exciting to be able to provide care to all these women. And the most important part is that it's covered by insurance. So you should not have to pay out of pocket for this. This should be insurance-covered care. And so we're working with all the payers around the country, and we are getting insurance-covered care for women in perimenopause and menopause.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I want to move on to Dr. Elizabeth Komen, who is an author as well as a practicing physician. Tell us about your why.
Oh, such a beautiful question, and I'm so deeply honored to be here. So I am a breast oncologist, and I can tell you that 2 women can have the same biology of their breast cancer, but how they experience their illness is uniquely determined by their culture, by their religion, by the stories they've been told about themselves and their bodies. And so much of my why comes from these sacred interactions that I've had with patients, not just about their cancer diagnosis, but their broader experience with the health system, their MS that was misdiagnosed, their frozen shoulder that went completely ignored and treated with benign neglect, their heart disease that wasn't appropriately addressed.
But my real why more recently was a really heartbreaking story. I was taking care of a patient for many years. You can live for a long time with what we call metastatic breast cancer. And I went to see her in the hospital 18 hours before she died. I had cared for her for many, many years. And on her deathbed, sort of gasping for air, I gave her a hug. And she apologized to me on her deathbed for sweating. And I thought to myself, I went back to clinic the next day, how many women have apologized to me? And in this woman's worst dying moment, her subconscious was still filled with apology.